Live now, but I don't really know. So I'm just going to wait a minute. And hello, I'm Catherine Oster. Facebook is so interesting with their live. Sometimes they just keep changing things on me, and I'm just never really sure what's going on. Okay, it's telling me I'm live now. Yay! I think I know I am for sure. How are you guys today? So it's Wednesday at 9 a.m., which is a different time than I normally do coffee chat. Normally, my coffee chat is on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. And it's September now. And for those of you that may not know, well, I guess I'll start off with my name again. I'm Catherine Oster, and I'm a certified facilitator of access consciousness. These really crazy, out there, pragmatic, easy to use tools. Good morning, Joy. That can help you change and create different things in your life. And I also grain farm with my husband and my brother-in-law and his wife. And so September brings upon harvest for us. We have to harvest the crops, get them into the bin. And so I never really know what my day is going to be like starting in September because if the weather is good and the crop is ready, we're in the field combining, and I'm probably going to do some lives with you from my tractor. Um, and we haven't started yet, but it's getting close. And then we had a rain shower this morning, so that's going to delay us by maybe a couple of days. We'll see. If the sun comes out and the wind blows, it dries faster. So that's why I changed the time to this morning, and here I am. And if you're watching live, I can't see who you are until you comment. I would love to know, and I would love for you to comment and even just tell me where you're from or what's up. Okay, so today we're going to have a talk about entities, and I have a ghost story for you. I'm so excited to tell you about it. It's so crazy. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background story about me and entities. Okay, so what do I mean about entities? What I'm talking about with regards to entities this morning is beings without bodies. Beings without bodies. Um, and they're around us, they're all over. And our bodies can give us our bodies are sensory organs. It's a sensory organ. It gives us information about things in the environment around us. So my life pre-access, before I heard about access or took any classes, I used to get this really weird eye twitch in this eye. It was always my right eye. Hi, Darla. And just underneath here, it would just like twitch, like the skin would like jump. And at the time, I was working as an agronomist, and it just started happening one day. And I thought, this is the weirdest thing. Like, what's going on? And it's not something you can stop, really. Like, I can't, like, I would like hold my eye like this and try to make it stop twitching because it would twitch uncontrollably and it would really annoy me. It was always getting my attention. And I'm like, am I stressed out? Like, what's going on here? Um, and so that was showing up. And then I took, I had my bars ran, and then I started listening to like some Access podcasts. And I was having a session, hey, mom, with a certified facilitator. And I forget what we were talking about, but during, group calls, you can ask questions. And she asked, like, does anybody have a question about something that's coming up for them? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes, I have a question. I unmuted myself and I'm like, my eye has been twitching uncontrollably for like a while now. It was like months. And I said, it just drives me a little bit crazy and I can't stop it. It's not something I can control. Like, what's going on? And so we asked the question, like she asked me questions, and that's how a facilitation goes. The facilitator asks you questions, and you answer based on what you know is true for you. So, what we kind of got to with those questions was that when my eye would twitch, it was my body giving me information about the energies around me, and it was my body giving me information that there were entities in the room. Okay, cool. And so there is the entity clearing in Access Consciousness where you just ask the entities questions and then they can clear and then they know that they have another choice. And that's kind of a whole other topic. But so my eye twitch, so when my eye would twitch, I would be like, okay, body, you're telling me there's entities around. Okay, cool. And then I would run the entity clearing. And it pretty much went away. Like I haven't experienced it for a few years. And when it would come up, I would just ask that question, run the entity clearing, gone. Now, a couple weeks, like a week ago, this eye twitch came back in an uncontrollable way, louder than ever before. And it would come up in my day, like in really random, weird places. It was never when I was in the same place. It was never if I was around the same people. Like it was just coming up all the time and getting my attention. And so I would ask the question, is this entities? Yes. And I would run the clearing, but that didn't change it. It kept persisting. And now I work for another certified facilitator, Crystal Crawford, and she was facilitating a Talk to the Entities intro class last week on Thursday. And I was administrating that class, meaning I was taking registrations, I was sending payment links, I was, doing like the administrative work for the class. And so it didn't surprise me that the eye twitch was coming up, but because I was working at the class, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I was participating in the class as well. And I didn't really come in with a question. It was weird. But Crystal was like, oh, and Catherine has a question. And I'm like, do I? And then my eye twitched loud, like it kept twitching. I'm like, oh yeah, that's my question. So during the class, I asked the question, I'm like, I've got this eye twitch coming up again. Like, what's going on? The entity clearing's not changing it for me. What is this? What other questions can I ask? What is this really? And so Crystal was like, well, there's kind of three things you can do with entities. You can clear them, which I knew how to do and was doing, and that wasn't shifting it. You can communicate with them, or you can receive from them. And so what this one was something different than clearing. So maybe it was communicating. So we asked questions around it. And we asked, so truth, is my eye twitch like one entity in particular? Is it the same one? Yes. I got a yes. And then it's like, is this person a boy, a man, or a woman? And what popped was a man. Is it a young man or an old man? It was a young man. So you just kind of start asking questions, because the thing about entity communication is you can't see them. So you really have to get out of figuring it out and trust what you are perceiving with the energies. So we got that it was a young man, and I'm like, okay. And then she asked me, like, do you know? Is it somebody you know? And that was kind of weird. It wasn't really a yes, I knew them, and it wasn't a no. So I was like, well, yeah, but not really. Okay. And then the next question she asked me was, do they want to communicate with you? And it was like, yes. And it's like, okay, so communicating with entities, like, I mean, some people, we all have different ways that we do it. And I've never really played with what that communication is for myself. So she's like, okay, well, close your eyes. Because when you close your eyes, you get out of thinking with your head and more into perceiving with your body. Close your eyes, lower your energetic barriers, and ask the entity to communicate with you. And so I did that. And I could just perceive like all of this energy around my body. Like it was like tingly, and there was just a lot of energetic activity. And I'm like, I can tell he's communicating with me, but I don't know what it is. Like I'm not getting any clear words or thoughts or anything. And so she said, okay, well, that's how, because entities communicate with very fast with energies, pictures sometimes. And she's like, "Did you receive the communication?" And I was like, "Yes, I did." And she's like, "Do you need to understand it now?" And I said, "No, I don't. I don't need to understand it now." Okay, cool. So I received the communication. I don't need to understand it now. What's next? What else is possible? So I just kind of continued with my day. And I can't remember if it was later that same day or maybe it was the next day. It just popped. Like I just had heard this thing in my head say, "Tell her to keep going." And it was really random. And I'm like, "Tell her to keep going?" Like, and then my eye twitched. And I'm like, so I tied the eye twitch with the entity, the young man who was trying to communicate with me. And the thought in my head was, "Tell her to keep going." And I'm like, "Oh, he wants me to give a message." Okay, so is that the message? Tell her to keep going. And the entity, it was like, "Yes." I just got a yes. That's the message. And I'm like, "Okay, who is this person? Do I know them?" And they were like, "Yes." And so the image that popped into my head was this lady who had just taken a foundation class with me like a few weeks ago, the beginning of August. And I'm like, "Tell her to keep going. And this is a message for her." And they're like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Oh, the young man, like this is her brother. Oh my God." And so you can tell like the energy, it just opened up. And I'm like, that's why I couldn't get a clear read on if I knew him, because I did, because we talked about him at the class and I haven't met him in body. I mean, he's not. So that's okay. It's you. And he was like, "Yes." And I was just so excited. Like when you get to something that is so true and light, the energy is undeniably expansive and exciting. And I'm like, "Oh, the message, like I got it." I'm like, okay. So I'd actually scheduled a follow-up foundation Zoom with these ladies to be happening in a few days. So I said to him, I'm like, "You need to remind me to tell her the message on the Zoom so I don't forget." And he was like, "Okay." And then my eye twitch went away. Like my eye twitch, like it would happen every day, all throughout the day, and it was kind of driving me crazy. And after I got his communication and that it was him and what the message was, it quit. And I'm like, okay, my body is brilliant and obvious, like, wow. So so we had our foundation Zoom with the ladies, and the lady in particular that I was supposed to give the message to, she was talking about how when she got home from the foundation class, she was doing so good and she was running these body processes and she was running her clearings and she was like really choosing every day this change and these processes. And then she hit a bump and it kind of fell apart. Like when things change, it can get really uncomfortable for us. And if we don't know, like sometimes people just quit and then there's so many things, so many different tools you can use and you don't know which one. And so you just don't use any. And that's kind of where she was after that bump. She just quit using the tools. And and then it reminded me, I got the memory in my head to tell her the message. And I said, "Oh, by the way, I have a message for you. And this is what's been going on for me." And I told her about my eye twitch, and because this is my first entity communication, it's kind of exciting. Not really my first one, but my first message delivering, I mean. And so I told her, and I'm like, "He told me to tell you to keep going." And she got some tears and she was like, "Yeah." And so another thing that she had chosen after the foundation class was she took out all of the pictures of her younger brother and she